Hey everybody, how are we all doing? I'm Whooper Time, and we're here with a new edition of the Game Boy-A-Thon, a series of streams where we play every Game Boy game released in North America and say something interesting about each game. Whether it's something about the developers behind it, some odd quirk that happens to be in the game, or we just kind of just ramble on about whatever. So we have a good selection of games for y'all today. We have 4 games, as we always do. And those games are going to be Roger Clemens, MVP Baseball, Dick Tracy, Radar Mission, and Roland's Curse. Very excited about today's choices. The games that we have selected are, I think, by and large, games nobody's really heard of. Maybe they've heard of, say, like Roger Clemens himself, or the property of Dick Tracy, the comic strip and whatnot. But they all are going to have something a little bit interesting to talk about. Also, this is going to be, believe, our 5th stream in a row where we're going to have a sports game. Enjoy it, because next stream is going to be the first time where we're not going to have a sports game. So it's gonna be a good one, I think, today. And I'm very, very excited to talk to y'all about it, because this episode is going to kind of go in some weird directions. Before we get started, Gumakuma, which, hello, how's it going, says, if you added a sports emote to Twitch, which sport would it be? Probably a football, because it's my favorite sport, but I'm not really sure. Maybe it'd be something weird. Maybe it'd be a cricket bat. I don't know. Maybe I'd get strange with it. Or strange for US standards, anyways. Oh. But yeah, so that is what we have gonna be going on today. And I think we should go ahead and get started here and start with our first game. Roger Clemens, MVP Baseball. Get this nice and loaded up. Enjoy that old school music. Ah, it's so nice sounding. I kind of like this. It's like nice, like introduction music, honestly. So this is Roger Clemens, MVP Baseball, developed by Sculpt Software, published by LJN, and released in 1992. As you can see, it has both single and multiplayer play, so if you do have a friend with another Game Boy and another copy of Roger Clemens MVP Baseball, you can hit that B button and do some link cable play, but we obviously don't have that. So we'll just hop on in here and play that single player. So, as you can see, you can kind of change things a little bit. Like, you can do, really the only options you have for, like, base locations for fielding, view dependent upon location where the ball is fielded, or standard, where you could just press a direction and then, I believe, the A button to throw the ball. And that's pretty much all we have as far as our options here. Exhibition and regular season modes. This uses a password system. But just go ahead and jump into a game real quick. We'll wonder where we would be at. Probably American Division East, huh? Boston Crabs. Here we go. Very important we pick the Boston Crabs, because they have our star of the show, Roger Clemens, as one of the pitchers. And we're, of course, going to go ahead and select them. And that lineup sounds good. So honestly, to start with, Roger Clemens MVP Baseball has a pretty good presentation. Decent amount of, like, custom graphics and whatnot. Now, the controls are kind of okay. It has this very interesting fielding style in the sense of when the ball is put into play, basically the batter hits the ball, it flips to the outfield, essentially. Or at least behind the defense, in order to allow you to do basically whatever it is you want to do here. It actually works out pretty well, in my opinion. But other than that, pitching is pretty standard for a lot of baseball games of this era. You can adjust where your pitcher is. You don't really have too much control over the speed of your pitches, I've noticed, doesn't seem like holding down speeds up your pitches considerably, or holding up slows them down. Or if they do, it's just not particularly noticeable. You do have the ability to curve your pitches at any time, though. And batting is incredibly standard. You can move your batter around in a box. You hit the A button to actually bat. And that's about all the options you have. There's actually no bunt. Oh, there is bunting, actually. You just tap the A button. All right, well, never mind. I was going to... My testing, I could not figure out how to bunt, but apparently you just tap the button, and you're good. So let's talk a little bit about Roger Clemens' MVP Baseball. So, MVP Baseball is a baseball game that does not have the Major League Baseball or Major League Baseball Players Association license. That is to say, it has no teams or real players, with one exception, Roger Clemens, the cover athlete for this game. Oh yeah, if you, oh god, failed to steal that. So, now, it does something very similar to games such as Bases Loaded or Ken Griffey Jr. in order to, like, fill out its rosters. It has, teams that are roughly about where they're supposed to be located in real life. The Boston Crabs are obviously supposed to be the Boston Red Sox. I don't remember what San Francisco's mascot in this game is, but there is a San Francisco team, and they just went yard on me. Well, that's unfortunate. And what they do for the players is very, very similar to that as well. So they obviously cannot use the names of the players, but instead what they do is they create a bunch of like fake names that mirror the real players. To give you some examples, Darryl Strawberry, a pretty famous player, I would say, is called Raspberry in this game. David Cone is called Conehead. David Justice is just known as Judge. Stuff like that. Some of these, they'll get really, really weird and kind of almost like inside jokey in a way. For instance, Dave Winfield is known as Windbrenner, which is a weird reference to Dave Winfield's very public feud with New York Yankees owner. I messed that up. I meant to throw it a second. Dave Winfield's very public feud with New York Yankees owner George Steinbrenner. So they just kind of combined the names too. It's all rather silly and fun. It's if you can't get the actual license, why not, right? Doesn't seem like a bad way to do it. Now, MVP Baseball was published by LGN. Now, LGN was acquired in the 1990s by Acclaim, so this is technically kind of like an Acclaim published game because of that. And while this isn't the first baseball game that LGN ever published, it is the first that they published while under Acclaim. Previous games that they have actually published is the game that's simply titled Major League Baseball, released for the Nintendo Entertainment System in 1988. So, since this is technically like the first published game that LGN, like first published baseball game that LGN did while under Acclaim, it kind of is in some ways, that was terrible right there, is kind of some ways the kind of the forebearer to like Frank Thomas's MVP Baseball and All-Star Baseball 99, even though the developer behind this is different from the developers of those games. Sculpture Software in this case, Iguana Entertainment for at least the main series of All-Star Baseball. So yeah, it's kind of interesting how that works out, really. Now, this game does play, well, as different as you possibly can for a baseball game. I think most baseball games have a pretty strict formula they follow, but as far as like how like the fielding is done and whatnot, even the hitting to a certain extent is considerably different from All-Star Baseball. So it's not a one-to-one, and there's probably just as much argument to say that this would not be like a direct predecessor to All-Star Baseball, but still, it's kind of interesting. Oof. So far, I'm not doing so great here. Baseball giveth and baseball taketh away, I guess. So, this game ended up coming out for multiple systems. Not only the Game Boy, but for the Nintendo Entertainment System, Super NES, and Genesis versions. Those versions, as you could probably expect, were a little bit more had a little bit more production value behind them, let's say. They would have music that would play during the game, digitized voice as well, obviously colors. They also had a faster pace of play as well. Now, this actually is something that works in favor of the Game Boy, having a slower pace of play, because these games actually did not review particularly well. Oh, geez. Well, stole that base, was not paying attention. So, these games at the time ended up reviewing very, very poorly, because one particular criticism is that, as mentioned, when the ball is put into play, it kind of flips the field around, and that many reviewers found that quite jarring. And it can be at times, even playing the Game Boy version. I did test out the Super Nintendo version, just to get like a nice comparison, and yeah, it is actually quite jarring. It moves just a little bit too quick to really field in a way that doesn't feel frustrating. Ooh, can we get that? Yes. The Game Boy version, though, since everything moves a little bit slower, it actually ends up working out just fine. I'm not completely convinced that this is, for instance, a bad baseball game. I don't think it's great, but, you know. It does as best as it can. It does what it can do for a game released in 1992 for the Game Boy. Overall, it's a baseball game and just a game on the Game Boy. It's not really anything special. Other than just kind of the historical footnote of being kind of sort of the first baseball game published for the Game Boy by Acclaim and LJN. So instead, let's go ahead and talk about the cover athlete. A1, Roger Clemens. Roger Clemens, maybe the greatest pitcher in Major League Baseball history, or at least he certainly is in the argument for it. He's a 7-time Cy Young Award winner, which is to say he was considered the best pitcher of the year 7 different years. He also won the 1986 American League Most Valuable Player, which, given that baseball pitchers only play roughly once every 5 games, meant that his contribution was considered so important that despite the fact that he only played in the 5th of the games, he was still their most valuable player. So, kind of gives you the idea that he's a bit of a big deal, right? Now, by the time this game came out in 1992, Clemens had already had a pretty distinguished career. By his time, he had already been pitching for about 8 years. Already gone to 5 All-Star games, won 3 of his Cy Youngs. All while pitching for the famed Boston Red Sox. And now most pitchers would just kill to have a career like that. But, well, he was only a third of his way through his career. He's actually going to pitch for 24 years. Technically more if you include stints in other professional leagues. Now, during the latter half of his career is when he would win the rest of the Cy Young Awards. He would win 2 World Series with, I believe, both the New York Yankees. And would even have the award for the best college baseball pitcher named after him. He was even named to Major League Baseball's All-Century team. So, once again, just kind of an important dude as far as the history of baseball, the story of baseball, if you will. Now, a player like this should be in the Hall of Fame, especially somebody who's been retired since 2008. But to start being considered for the full 10 years of eligibility, he never got enough votes to be elected. You need to get 75% of votes from anybody who has eligibility to vote, and he only got, I think, 65% in his final year. Now, this probably seems odd, but there's 2 particularly big reasons for this. The first is that he was kind of a jerk. I did not run back, so that was an easy double play for them. So, Roger Clemens, huge jerk throughout his career. Now, there's quite a few stories as far as, that would, help illustrate this, so I'm only going to just, point out a few. He kind of had a habit for being known as, a headhunter. And what I mean by that is if you kind of upset him for any reason in a game, he was more than happy to just throw the baseball at your head. Or at least certain parts of your body. Now, he's obviously not the only baseball player to do this. Bob Gibson, another famous pitcher, is actually well known for doing this, is actually beloved. But, you know, Clemens would do this, and obviously the jerkiness didn't stop there. He also had a habit of threatening people, such as a reporter for Channel 5 Boston by the name of Mike Dowling. Could have swore I held left there, but I guess I did not. So the story goes is that basically, he had an interview with Dowling, and where he basically just came off as, a huge jerk. He torched his organization, the Red Sox, torched their support staff, talked about how it's totally okay for him to charge kids for autographs, stuff like that. And so, obviously, this didn't go well, so they decided to schedule another interview so he could kind of, set the record straight and, be like, no, I'm not a jerk. Everything's fine. I didn't mean any of that. Instead, what he did is that he ended up threatening Dowling halfway through, telling him that, quote, somebody's going to get hurt and it is going to be me, end quote. And of course, this is to say nothing about all the extramarital affairs he had, at least 5 in total, including one with somebody 13 years his junior that he met when she was 15. Relationship did not become sexual until she was 18, so there's at least that. Now, this should be enough to keep him out of the Hall of Fame, but if you know anything about professional sports and my inability to throw to first base, that is never enough. That man just hit a grand slam. Roger Clemens is having a very bad day today. But so he still ended up having a chance to be elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame, except in 2008, a congressional inquiry was launched that ultimately resulted in something called the Mitchell Report. The Mitchell Report was a congressional inquiry into the prevalence of performance-enhancing drugs, particularly anabolic steroids, in Major League Baseball. And this is after a book was published by a former player by the name of Jose Canseco. Basically, Canseco said, hey, I think pretty much everybody in baseball is using drugs. And he was right, turns out. So Clemens was brought in front of Congress to testify if he ever took or had knowledge of steroid use, because he was one of the players accused in Canseco's book. And he denied that, he said he never took any drugs. Unfortunately, his statements were considered inconsistent, and evidence came out that he most certainly did take anabolic steroids. And so he was charged with perjury and obstruction of Congress, which are both felonies. Whoops. Now, he ended up being found not guilty of this, but it was still enough to basically destroy his reputation in the eyes of the people who vote for the Hall of Fame, the Baseball Writers Association of America. And so because of that, they did not elect him. And he's not the only player who ended up receiving this treatment. Barry Bonds was the same. Another player who was possibly the greatest hitter of all time, and also a colossal jerk with plenty of extramarital affairs. So, goes with the territory, I guess. So it's still possible for him to be elected via the Veterans Committee at some point, but it's unknown if that'll ever happen. Probably not. And to this day, Roger Clemens maintains that he has never used steroids. So yeah. Also, the rare occasion of somebody lying in front of Congress and actually being put on trial for it. Also shows that it's very, very hard to convict somebody for perjury in this country. And that's the tale of Roger Clemens. So, I don't think we need to really play too much of this game anymore. Like I said, I don't think it's that bad of a baseball game overall. I think All-Star Baseball 99 is better. And I wouldn't be surprised if there are other better baseball games for the Game Boy, but honestly, this isn't too bad. So let's go ahead and move on to our next game. And that next game is going to be Dick Tracy. Dick Tracy, published by Bandai America, developed by Real Time Associates, and released in 1991. Not really much as far as options here. I believe this has a password system. Indeed it does. Oh, what does it say if you failed the password? Tonight's program has been brought to you by our sponsor, Wizzo Chocolates. Huh. Oh, did you now, Worms? Worms says he is read up on some Dick Tracy trivia. Well, we have a little bit of trivia. There's quite a bit to actually talk about with this game, which is kind of hard to believe, honestly. First off, this actually starts out very impressive. I like this little cutscene that's happening here, as mobsters rescue their boss, Big Boy. And look at that. Nice little crime wave's about to start. Isn't that great? Shoulders was the last thug to visit Big Boy in jail. Alright. Now, Dick Tracy is a terrible video game. First off, this is your punch. It's your main attack. Worms of Can says, did you know Big Boy is an Al Capone stand-in? I did. Yeah, Dick Tracy is based upon a comic strip that essentially takes place in the 1920s and 1930s. Really more 1930s. And yeah, basically stars the detective Dick Tracy, a yellow trench coat and fedora wearing detective, as he stops various mobsters using high-tech gadgets. Mobsters have names like Big Boy and Shoulders and Greaseball and whatnot. Flat Top. All sorts of very, very strange names. The game itself is not particularly great, as you can tell. Your enemies have about the same reach as you do as far as your punches are concerned. And that has a tendency to work out not in your favor. But you do eventually get like a gun that you can use. We can get a maximum of 10 bullets. Also, this is the classic game where literally everything is trying to kill you. Absolutely, absolutely everything. Without question. The strategy for the first couple of enemies is to run up to them and immediately duck. Though some of them are going to eventually learn how to duck as well. You can press select to select different weapons. And of course, guns are very useful in this. Once again, you can only hold a maximum of 10 bullets. So, once again, Dick Tracy is based upon the 1920s and 1930s comic strip, as well as the 1990s movie adaptation that was brought to us by Disney and Warren Beatty. So, how this came about is that there's been like attempts to bring a Dick Tracy movie to theaters for just the longest time, like since the 70s. And Warren Beatty, a famous actor and producer, winner of multiple Emmys and whatnot, was really, really interested in playing Dick Tracy. Like, incredibly interested. Like, he was trying since 1975 in order to get this movie made. And the story goes is that he was just unable to get the film rights from one Michael Laughlin. Laughlin being a fellow producer in Hollywood. And like Laughlin, though, was unsuccessful in making the movie himself. Now, the movie rights would bounce around to various people in the 70s and 80s, and they would all try and fail to get a movie made. And a big reason why this continuously failed is because the creator of Dick Tracy, one Chester Gould, insisted on having strict financial and artistic control. And so, no studio was going to agree to that. And so because of that, just the movie never got made. That is... Oh. Apparently, when you lose all your health, you have a little bit of time to continue moving around. That's convenient. Wait. Okay, first off, tear gas. Rad. So the movie ideas just continue to bounce around, right? With a lot of people were attached to this project. Steven Spielberg and John Landis were attached at one point to direct. Clint Eastwood was attached to play Dick Tracy himself. But just nothing could get done. Eventually, though, Warren Beatty won out. And he was able to convince Disney to go ahead and finance the movie in 1988. And so they got started on making it. So this movie would end up starring, of course, Warren Beatty as Dick Tracy. Madonna was going to play a prominent role in the movie. And the role of Big Boy himself, I believe, was played by Al Pacino. So a pretty star-studded cast, all told. And the movie, at least reception-wise, actually did very well for Disney. Ended up being nominated for, I think, 7 Academy Awards. And it ended up winning 3. 3 of 1 was for Best Art Direction, Best Makeup, and Original Song. However, the movie didn't quite earn a profit, and Jeffrey Katzenberg, who was in charge of the movie studios at Disney at the time, said it was kind of a regretful decision they made to even make this movie in the first place. So, kind of unfortunate. There was plans for a sequel, but it just never ended up getting made. But honestly, kind of don't feel too bad for old Beatty. He got to do what he wanted to do. Now, this kind of would be the end of it, because this game is, honestly, it's just, you can tell it's kind of bad. The controls are very, very stiff. Your sprite is very, very large, and enemies kind of blend into the background. It doesn't do a good job of separating the enemies from the backgrounds using the 4 colors available to the Game Boy. And I imagine it's a blurry, blurry mess. I think I'm dead. Yep. Bye, Dick Tracy. Oh no, you've lost, Tracy! Yeah, I will get you next time, big boy. Yes, continue. Oh, actually very, very generous continue system, it looks like. So, this game was developed. Crazy says, why is Fist a quantity that moreover decreases with time? Oh, I don't think it decreases at all. I think we just have 6 minutes to get through the stage. Though that would be funny if, like, there was a stamina system in this. Oh, you can't actually aim up. That's quite nice. So this game was developed by Real Time Associates. Which we've actually already played 2 of Real Time Associates games so far on this system. On this stream, I should say. When we played good old All-Star Baseball 99 and Word Zap. Now, this is a company that really shouldn't matter too much in the grand scheme of things, but it turns out they have a very interesting history behind them, so I figured this random Dick Tracy game was where we should do that. We should talk a little bit about them. So Real Time Associates was founded in 1986 by one David Warhol. Now, Warhol is a former employee of Mattel. And in 1986, he and a bunch of Mattel employees who had previously worked on their console, the Intellivision, decided they were going to go form their own company, which is exactly what they did. Went and made... Ah, man. And they went and made Real Time Associates. Rosa Kant says, any relation to Andy? No. 0 relation, as it turns out. I did actually look into that just to make sure, but yeah. Zero association. We are doing very good here. So, they made this company in 1986 with the express idea of making Intellivision games. A plan that was kind of terrible because the Intellivision by that point was well on its way out, having been essentially supplanted by the far superior by the far superior Nintendo Entertainment System. So, instead, they pivoted to making games for the NES. Making such games such as a port of Maniac Mansion, as well as Caesar's Palace, the Vegas-inspired game. Now, They would continue to make games for other Nintendo systems as well, such as the Super Nintendo, obviously the Game Boy. They have a ton of Game Boy games. As well as the Nintendo 64 and later PlayStation. But they're probably most interesting for their history with Sega. Cartridge Spoiler says, Dick Tracy on the NES was horrible. I assume all of Dick Tracy games are horrible. This one's pretty bad, so you would be quite correct. Also, hey, how's it going? Thank you so much for the resub. So yeah, they had a very interesting history with Sega. Now, they made a bunch of games for the Genesis, including Real Monsters. I should give that a little bit more excitement to that. Real Monsters! And Normie's Beach Babe-O-Rama. A hot banger of a game, let me assure you. But for some reason, this actually ended up really impressing Sega. To the point that they invited them to join what was called their Tiger Team, also known as the Away Team. Now, the Tiger Team was a team of developers that was formed in 1993 for the sole purpose of creating next-generation games for Sega. Particularly, the Sega Saturn. And so that's exactly what they got to work doing. Now, the game they ended up making... Ooh, a Tommy gun. Let's grab that Tommy gun real quick. It's also just turned into Donkey Kong somehow. So the game that they ended up making for the Saturn was a little game called Bug. Or Bug! This is B-U-G, exclamation point. Now, Bug is probably a little forgotten nowadays, but it played a huge role in the rollout of the Sega Saturn. Bug is a 3D game that's played on a 2D track, kind of like how a lot of 2D platformers are nowadays. You know, 3D graphics, but they're ultimately 2D. I punched that man real hard. And it stars a character called Bug. Bug is a green bug and Hollywood actor, apparently, who hopes to defeat the evil Queen Cadavera. Now, it was a relatively well-received game back in the day, but it's the development that really shines out for this. Oh, I'm sorry, I guess we have to do this now. We'll get back to Bug in a second. Let me do this cool puzzle. This is really, really unexpected. I think this goes up here. Okay, no. This goes here. Okay, that has to be up there. Oh, but where's this photo go? Can't be down there. Oh, no. Oh, wait. There we go. Had these all backwards. Although I'm not really sure where this goes. Oh my god. This is awful. Oh my, I really did not expect to be derailed by this, of all things. Oh no! Oh, I was nowhere close! I got one bonus strength, apparently. Alright. So, let's get back to Bug. Yeah, so once again, Bug, pretty forgotten game. 3D platformer that was played on a 2D track. It stars, you know, a green bug and Hollywood actor by the name of Bug. Now, once again, should be a forgotten game, but it ended up being memorable because of its development. And that's because it was, well, if you know anything about the Saturn, you know that there's not really a real Sonic the Hedgehog game for it. They did not have a game that starred their mascot on there. with the exception, of course, of the racing game Sonic R, as well as Sonic Jam, the collection of Sonic games that ended up being released on there. So, Sega of America was well aware of this, and they wanted to kind of get out ahead of this and have like a mascot platform on there that could help represent the Saturn. Now, there was quite a few choices that they could have made for that. One of them was Clockwork Knight, who's star of the titular game, The Clockwork Knight. Astal, also starring in a game called Astal. And of course, Bug. Now, for one reason or another, Bug won out, and for a short while was the face of Saturn's marketing push. It's kind of strange because they actually, while they owned Clockwork Knight and Astal, they did not own Bug, and yet they selected it to basically be the face of it. So, of the Saturn. It's quite strange. So, hey, good on Bug for that. And to be fair, like, it wasn't just Sega Brass that apparently believed in Bug. Apparently at the Consumer Electronics Show in 1995, I believe, Steven Spielberg was known to declare that Bug was going to, quote, going to do it for the Saturn. He apparently is very excited about Bug. And hey, to be fair, it apparently did sell pretty well. And eventually even came out for the PC. There was a PC port. Clockwork Knight is an okay video game, but yeah, it would not have been a good choice for a Saturn mascot. It did play into their marketing push as well, though. Like, it did actually feature pretty prominently. So, Bug sold pretty well. And it actually got a sequel. That is a murderer's row right there. My god. The sequel was called Bug 2, spelled T-O-O. A game that stars, of course, Bug, and a cool new character named Superfly. He's a bug with platform shoes and an afro. This didn't do well, and Bug kind of died after that. The series was over. Though Real-Time Associates continued on. And while they did do a few more Saturn games, they actually ended up moving on from developing... I don't want to be... This is almost kind of derogatory, but kind of like big boy games in a way. Games for like the main consoles. And instead, they continued their relationship with Sega by making edutainment games. Specifically, they started to develop games for the Pico, the Sega Pico. A little kind of like tablet device you could hook up to your TV to play, simple edutainment games that would have like Sonic in them and whatnot. So, they did that and they eventually moved on to the Leapfrog system, which is another edutainment platform as well. Nowadays, it's actually very tough to say if they're even a functioning company anymore. It seems like they're not. Like they've gone defunct. The last game that they are known to have published was Deep Pocket's Super Pool and Billiards for the Xbox 360 back in 2010. But their website apparently still exists. If you want to see a really good Web 2.0 website, you should type in Real-Time Associates into Google and go and check them out. They'll be happy to tell you all about their 401k program, which actually seems pretty generous. And apparently they are actively hiring. Whenever that website was last updated. Presumably 2009. And that's kind of the story of Real-Time Associates, a company that, for a short while was actually very important in Sega's plans. Before they became very suddenly not important. Or at least, not for their, mainstream console needs. So, I think that's probably going to do it for us when it comes to Dick Tracy, though. Poor old Dick Tracy is not a particularly good game, I think. Once again, stiff controls, and they just really love to throw enemies that just suddenly show up on screen and shoot you without ability to react. I would not recommend this game to anybody. So how about we go ahead and move on to our next game? And that is going to be Radar Mission. Radar Mission. Developed by Nintendo and published by Nintendo in 1990. Paranormal says, anyone ever see the batshit in-character interview Warren Beatty did like 20 years later so he can keep the Dick Tracy rights? That is true. He does still own the Dick Tracy rights and is still actively trying to get a sequel made, if I remember correctly. And yes, he did do an interview in person and had it published so he could keep the rights. That is correct. Thank you for pointing that out, Paranormal. Gundakuma says, is this a Missile Command clone or a fishing game? Actually, neither. It's a very odd military strategy game. So, this is another multiplayer game. Obviously, we do not have another Game Boy and a link cable, so we're not going to do that. And it's Game A and Game B, and they are radically different games. We'll start with Game A. Game A is a battleship clone, essentially. A little bit more nuanced than that. As you can see, you have stuff like aircraft, near misses, and lucky shots, and you can also select the commanders in charge. You only have two commanders. You either have this, MacArthur-looking dude, or I'm guessing this is like a Yamamoto stand-in. And then you have this derpy fella, this fine British gentleman, and whoever this Popeye character is. We'll go against Derpy McDerp. Worms Can says, is there a Russian commander who has the special ability to randomly sink their own fleet? Unfortunately, no. So yeah, when I say this is a battleship clone, I'm not lying. So yeah, you can arrange them in any way you want. So we'll just kind of do that real quick. And we'll just... There we go. That's good. I think that's great. So, this does have a really nice presentation to it. As you can see, just like, kind of like cool little animations that happen. Kind of impressive for 1990. Because I don't believe this was on a particularly big cartridge. I think this was on like a 512 kilobyte cartridge. And so yeah, you're essentially playing Battleship. Oh, lucky. So we did hit? Ooh, they got close. Let's fire there. Oh my, there's a lot of ships out there. Gundam Kuma says, was this the Famicom War Team messing around / getting used to the hardware? No. This was actually developed by Nintendo's R&D 1. Not Intelligence Systems. So yeah, while we're playing this, we might as well talk a little bit about this game and its origins. Before we end up jumping into Game B, which is wildly, wildly different. Let's fire here. This isn't... JK4 says, oh, this is multiplayer via link cable. It is. Oh, we got pretty close there, so we know the enemy's nearby. So, Radar Mission has the distinction of being developed by Nintendo's famed R&D 1, which is Nintendo's original development team, their very first one, and headed by the legendary Gunpei Yokoi. In fact, information I have found on this game suggests he was one of the lead designers of this. Rather than just being like the producer. Like, at this point, he was usually like just producing games as part of R&D 1. So the idea that he actually got to work like doing things for this is very, very interesting to me. Now, because he is the designer on this, I think this is as good of a time as any. Ooh, direct hit, nice. As good of a time as any to talk about this. To talk about this man, because he is incredibly important. You see, when it comes to like people in Nintendo, like think about who like the most important person to work at Nintendo. I think there's quite a few names that come up, right? There's, of course, Shigeru Miyamoto, the legendary designer who created Mario and Zelda and countless other franchises for Nintendo. There's a former president, Hiroshi Yamauchi, who made the fateful decision to leave behind the playing card business and focus on the broader amusement industry, eventually building Nintendo to what it is today. Right? You know, very, very important people. But for my record, for my feelings on this subject, they're not the most important people. I think that distinction goes to Gunpei Yokoi. Because Yokoi is more than somebody who made a game or designed a handheld or did anything like that. He developed a philosophy that Nintendo still follows to this day, and one that's made him incredibly, incredibly successful. So I think to start with, we should talk, give a short biography of this man. Yokoi was hired at Nintendo in 1965 after graduating with a degree in electronics. His primary purpose was to maintain their assembly line machines for the Hanafuna cards. And because at that time, that was still Nintendo's primary business. Now, the story goes is that one day, Hiroshi Yamaguchi, my apologies, the president of Nintendo, was touring the factory when he noticed a handmade toy. And a little extend arm that you could use to grab distant objects was just kind of lying out. And Yamaguchi was taken by this. And after meeting with Yokoi, the man who made it, he convinced him to refine the design and allow Nintendo to sell it that year. Now, it sold incredibly, incredibly well. Oh my. Lucky, lucky us. So it sold incredibly well, something over 1 million units. And it solidified Yamaguchi's decision to move Nintendo away from the playing card business. It also gave the spotlight to Yokoi, who at this point had been discovered to be just quite the tinkerer. Like, he just loved messing around with things, taking them apart, putting them back together, and making cool stuff. So he would go on to design numerous toys for Nintendo. These include the Ultra Machine, which is a little machine that could throw baseballs that people could hit. A Love Tester machine. One of the earliest light gun toys he helped make. All sorts of cool little stuff. Now, when Nintendo decided to enter the video game business, Yokoi was the obvious choice to lead their first-party development squad and their first development house, Nintendo R&D 1. It was there that Yokoi developed a philosophy that would define Nintendo. Now, the story goes is that Yokoi was on a commuter train, right? As he was trying to think of ideas for new products for Nintendo, when he saw a bored businessman playing with a cheap LCD calculator. I'm sure everybody's seen one of those, just a little small band calculator that, displays numbers in black and white. And he saw how he was just entering random numbers to pass the time. Now, Yokoi saw that, and he saw that as an opportunity. Because he was like, hey, if somebody, was having fun playing around with that, what if I could use that to make a game? Now, this happened to be quite the opportunity, because at that time, there was a bit of a calculator war going on. Sharp and Casio, two electronics companies, were in a hell of a battle to make as many cheap calculators as possible. Now, the problem with doing that is it meant that there was a glut of components on the market for calculators, including stuff like, say, the LCD screens or cheap processors. So, Yokoi saw that and was like, hey, if we buy all of these cheap screens and semiconductors up, we could use them and put together something for the cheap. And Yokoi, being the tinkerer he is, took these supplies and used them to create the first portable consoles for Nintendo. The Game & Watch series. A cheap LCD toy that would have a clock and simple game people could play. And these were very successful for Nintendo. Not only because it sold well, but because they were very cheap to make. but he ended up like just earning quite a bit of money off of this. It's from here that Yokoi developed the philosophy I've been leading up to this entire time, and that philosophy is called lateral thinking with withered technology. Now, what this means is as the idea of utilizing existing technology, a lot that's considered outdated, such as these cheap LCD screens, for instance, and finding new and interesting ways to make something fun. So, the reason behind doing this was twofold. One was obviously because it's cheap, right? These parts are out there, you can buy them up on the cheap. The second is because these devices and their flaws at this point are well understood. And if you understand their flaws and their limitations, it means it makes it easier for you to work around those flaws. And that's exactly what they did with the Game & Watch series. Like, they understood that, the processors were cheap and not very powerful, and the screens could only do so much, so they designed their simple games around that to take advantage of those flaws, and instead turn them into positives for Nintendo. Yokoi really held on to the belief through this philosophy that toys and games didn't require cutting-edge technology to be fun, and to be honest, at least at Nintendo, I think that belief really won out. Because it's that philosophy that influenced how the Game Boy and the Super Nintendo were developed. For instance, for the Super Nintendo, it used a similar CPU to the NES. It was essentially a souped-up version that was just built up for a 16-bit console. One that honestly made it weaker than its competition, such as the Sega Genesis. But it was also meant it was easier to make games for, since the technology was well understood. And Nintendo instead used that opportunity to, put other technologies around it that could work well within that particular CPU. And, allowed them to basically design a console that was a little bit cheaper. Worked out pretty well. Everyone loves the Super Nintendo. It's a great console. Now, for the Game Boy, this is obviously much more stark. Now, Yokoi is called the father of the Game Boy for a reason, because while he isn't the sole designer behind it, a lot of his ideas ended up coming in and influencing the design of this. Now, the Game Boy, as we've gone over before, has a monochrome screen with an incredibly low refresh rate and a relatively weak CPU, right? It's a system that is incredibly underpowered. Especially when compared to its contemporaries, like the Atari Lynx, which also came out in 1989, same year as the Game Boy. Had a color screen, had more powerful CPU, more impressive looking games. Sega Game Gear that came out the year following that, 1990. Kind of the same deal, right? And, this is really impressive, by the way. So these should be game changers for the Lynx and the Game Gear, right? That should totally... it should, just absolutely, change things for them. But it didn't. The Game Boy ended up, outselling all of them. Because these advantages arguably proved to be their downfall. Because the Game Boy was not only considerably cheaper to purchase, it was only $89 when it came out in 1989. Compared to $149 for the Game Gear, which came out the following year. But it was also cheaper in the long run for the average consumer. The Game Boy had a considerably longer battery life, averaging about 15 hours to up to 30 in some cases, on 4 AA batteries. Whereas the Game Gear and Lynx averaged roughly about 3 to 6 hours on 6 AA batteries. So you're having to purchase more batteries, spend more money in order to actually use these systems. And so combine that with just software that worked wonderfully within the limits of the Game Boy. A lot of those games developed by R&D 1, you can probably guess why things worked out well for the Game Boy, and why they ultimately won out. And why Gunpei's philosophy ultimately won out as well. Now, Yokoi would leave the company in 1997. But this philosophy continued even after he left. While Nintendo did try to chase cutting-edge technology for a short while, the Nintendo 64 and GameCube, eventually they reverted back to Yokoi's philosophy with the Nintendo Wii, a system that initially was heavily criticized for being essentially a souped-up GameCube. However, with that system, they used other well-understood technologies, such as gyroscopes and whatnot, to make an interesting motion control defined system that not only sold for cheap, but also intrigued the customer and sold like hotcakes. The Nintendo Switch is much the same way. There's nothing in the Switch, even when it came out, that was cutting edge. But the way they used that technology, the screens that they had, the CPU that they had there, and the ideas that they had developed, they ended up making something that was incredibly cool and is much beloved now. Everyone loves the Switch. The Switch is a great system. Nintendo, from the Wii all the way to the Switch, Nintendo is stuck with the idea of lateral thinking with later technology, and it's served them incredibly well, and it's all thanks to Yokoi. And that's why I think he's the most important person to ever work for Nintendo. Also, I didn't realize we got a hit here. We should probably shoot. So yeah. 127 Crazy says, I think playing this game was how the Cuban Missile Crisis was resolved. You're probably not wrong. Captain Kuma says, the best part was how the Switch didn't totally replace the 3DS, just like the 3DS to DS. That's correct. It didn't. And in large part, it's because of this philosophy. They still felt like there was a need and something they could do with that system, and honestly, they were right. We are getting totally messed up. Paranormal says, ironic that Yokoi's downfall in Nintendo is when he went against his own philosophy with the Virtual Boy. There's definitely an argument to be made there, certainly. Certainly is. I want to see if we can't salvage this fight. I'm getting absolutely bodied. Is that a sink? All right. We really don't have a whole lot of ships left, though. We are just getting, we're getting manhandled here. People thought Skippy was an idiot, but it turns out Skippy may have been the most dangerous admiral in the fleet. Well, I don't think we're gonna save this, so instead, I think what we need to do is reset. And go and play Game B. So Game B is something completely wild. Or at least wilder than you would expect. So it's a submarine game. Turns out. You would think it would be like something related to the Battleship clone, but no, it totally is not. So yeah, you can go ahead and just get all the upgrades, because why not? And yeah, your mission here is to sink all the ships before they sink you. And first off, very impressive parallax going on here. I don't know if you noticed that. There we go, got one. You gotta go all the way back over. Completely miss. There we go. And of course you can press down to go underneath the water as well. I don't know if that's actually helpful or not, but you can. And that's neat. Yeah, I mean, this is a very, very... If you really think about it, this is a very, very impressive looking game. Ooh, that sub messed us up, though. Did you see that? I'm not sure. I'm not sure, Worms. Worms says, I recognize... what is this song? I recognize it from somewhere else. I'm not really sure. Man, we didn't even get Cadet. Alright. Let's go to practice. Let's go to practice. And try this again. But But yeah, this is just like a really cool little mode, just with how like the parallax works and whatnot, and like the transitions from above to below water. It's just really, really neat. Like, is it fun? I'm not completely convinced. Like, I'm not completely convinced like the Battleship clone is particularly fun. I bet it's cool in multiplayer. But I'm not really so certain that this is a good single player game, you know? But like it has a very interesting depth to it. Like in the sense of like I mean literally like you have to like really considerably lead your shots for objects that are in the background. Which is just neat. That's just neat. Oh. Okay, let's see if we can't get the sub. Oh, nope. Sub went away. Man, some of these ships are very, very fast. KPBot says, remember the Game Boy Fish Finder accessory? I do. It's a good accessory. Yeah, there's a lot of very interesting peripherals. Oof. We got him. Ooh, I think I actually slowed us down a little bit. I think we ended up taking such a massive hit. Let's see if we can't catch up to the ship this way. Yeah! That sub blew up in a real bad way for that dude. Yeah, look at that. Not bad. A lot less points because it's practice, it looks like. Oh, but then we can... Oh, but we have no money, so we can't do anything for stage 2, unfortunately. That's unfortunate. But yeah, it's just a cool little game. I do really like the music an awful lot. The music is very, very good. Alright, got that. We'll probably end up moving on here in just a second. But I'm actually legit enjoying myself. I don't know if I would recommend this game, but it definitely is. It's definitely a game that's like pushing the boundaries of what the Game Boy can do, which is impressive given that it was released in 1990. So why don't we go ahead? Actually, you know what? Let's go ahead and move on. Let's go ahead and move on to our final game today. And that's going to be Roland's Curse. Good old Roland's Curse. Developed by My apologies. Developed by NMK, or Nippon Microcomputer Kaihatsu, and published by American Sammy. Released in 1991. This is another password-based game. And it's a pretty considerable password, too, from the looks of it. Unfortunately, not a good enough password for us. Also, I don't think we can actually get out of this. Oops. So we gotta reset the game. How embarrassing. Alright, so yeah, let's just jump on in here. So as you can see, this is a multiplayer game. A fact that it's going to be incredibly wild when you realize this game is very much Zelda-like. Imagine it's Zelda, but it's very, very stiff. Also just sort of dumps you into the game, as you can tell. Your quest has begun. You better believe it has. Walk very slowly up there. Get that. And then I guess we better start our quest. So yeah, this game is Zelda-like. Which actually makes it really, really cool that it's like multiplayer. because it is simultaneous multiplayer. Now, the story behind this game is that you play as an unnamed hero who has traveled to the kingdom of Roland and have decided to take upon the quest to defeat the evil King Barius and his legion of regenerating monsters. Along the way, you find a bunch of items that will help you in your quest. You can get upgrades such as like that armor that we got that increases our max health. And among other things as well. And once again, multiplayer mode, which is strange. That's just strange. Like it was doing multiplayer, like a Zelda multiplayer before Zelda was. So this is quite impressive considering that the first Zelda game for the Game Boy is not going to come out until 1993. So Roland's Curse has the distinction of actually beating this by a good 2 years. So good on them. We're actually getting pretty lucky with these drops. These drops are completely random, as far as I know, but as you can see, we already gotten quite a few health ups. Oh my, this slime is the OP slime. Yes, please, I will take all this health. Nah, it's not giving me anymore. Maybe there's a limited amount of drops. I would not be shocked if there was. So yeah, a lot of neat features in this game. Obviously, it's not exactly the best-looking game. Oh, we got a pickaxe. That's kind of cool. Not sure what we would be using that pickaxe for, but I guess we'll find out soon enough. Let's head up. Let's head up into the mountains now that we have a pickaxe. It's a very stiff game. Very, very stiff, as you can tell. It's very much tile-based, and it seems like you walk essentially half a tile with a button press, which makes it a little difficult to turn around and hit enemies at times. Particularly some of the faster-moving enemies. Like, it also seems like the enemies just do not respond to your hits. In a sense, they're not like knocked back like a Zelda enemy would be, right? So like those spiders will body you. The spiders do not respect you, which fair. I don't respect this unnamed hero either. So I think that's perfectly understandable. So Roland's Curse once again was developed by NMK, or Nippon Microcomputer Kaihatsu, a company that was founded in 1985. So another 80s company here, by Yukio Kotoyori. And this was a company that was made up of a lot of the team members that were behind the original Bomb Jack, an arcade game that is perhaps a little bit better known for its sequel, Mighty Bomb Jack. Now, this company is going to end up being known for, oddly enough, primarily its Twitch shooters. Basically, it's like horizontal and vertical arcade shooters. Games such as Z-Blade, Thunder Dragon 1 and 2, and even a Super Dimensional Fortress Macross game. High Life Low Life says they used the engine from that partially, didn't they? I don't know from their... Oh, from Bomb Jack for this. I think this actually is a bespoke engine that's being used here. This engine is going to be reused for a lot of Game Boy games, though, that they're going to make. Because, you see, while they did make a lot of shooters and whatnot, they did... When they moved on to the Game Boy, they decided to do something else, which is the Roland's Curse series. Because you see, this is not the only Roland's Curse game. There's going to be a sequel that's going to be released a couple years later. And they in fact did another game called Ninja Taro that uses the exact same engine. We talked very, very briefly about Ninja Taro all the way in our first episode when we were playing the game Mario's Mission. Because that game, Mario's Mission and Ninja Taro, are both part of the Ninja Jajo Maru-kun series. Although instead of being a side-scroller, it's a top-down game just like this is. So that's kind of neat. Now, this is when I first saw this game. Oh, hello. What do we have here? We have a wand. That's pretty rad. Now, this game, I had never heard of it before, much less its sequel and whatnot. For a game released in 1991, it does seem pretty impressive. Like I said, it controls pretty terribly, and does seem kind of basic in many different facets. But if you were hankering from Zelda, some Zelda action and whatnot, this game at least seems to have the ability to deliver. So that's kind of cool. Now, NMK would not stop here. They would, of course, continue to make arcade shooters and whatnot, up until about 1999, when they would finally go bankrupt. Now, it seems like the company would still exist in some form in 2003, as they did work on the Jaleco collection for the PlayStation. But after that, they would formally cease to exist. Thus having kind of an interesting arcade legacy that they had. I'm actually very excited to see what sort of improvements they have for Roland's Curse 2. From what little I seen and whatnot. Oh, apparently pickaxes can knock down trees, by the way. From what little I've seen, apparently it is quite a bit more robust. You actually have a party of 3 characters you can switch between that all have different skills and whatnot. It seems like they get very ambitious with it. Which that's good. To get more used to the Game Boy hardware, and they figure out some cool things they could potentially do with it. Makes me very excited to try it out, because honestly, I am enjoying what I'm seeing here so far. Even if the controls are kinda terrible. I did try to look up footage of this being played multiplayer, and I wasn't really able to find any. Certainly are plenty of people who have played this game through to completion. But nothing else too particularly crazy beyond that. Yeah, so as you can see, you can it looks like you actually cannot alter your weapons at all. I thought you totally could, but it looks like you just pick them up and they get slotted in. That's interesting. Yeah, it doesn't seem like there's an inventory. Select just stops you in place too, which is odd. But yeah, this is an interesting game released very early in the Game Boy's lifespan. And so far, I actually would give this a pretty hearty recommendation. At least from what little I'm seeing here. And I'll be very interested to see what they do with the second game and Ninja Taro. Particularly Ninja Taro, because I wonder if they're going to do anything that's going to incorporate elements from... that's going to be from Roland's Curse and whatnot, or if they're actually going to try something that's considerably different. But yeah. Did we actually... Oh, we actually already went in here. Oh, that was just another entrance up here. Well, that's just embarrassing. Alright, well, let's dip out of here and let's head south for a little bit. Just kind of check that out and see what we got. We'll probably not play this for too much longer, but... yeah, once again, enjoying what I'm playing. There's a good example of the controls working against you. I wanted to look it down so I can actually attack that enemy, but once again, just even a tap will send you at least half a tile. And enemies will most definitely just run into you and mess you up. So we did not explore our bottom right corner here. I'm guessing this is probably where we have to go. Oh yeah, look at that. No, you cannot. If you hold down any button Select B or A, it just freezes you in place. So unfortunately, you cannot use the controls to help you out there. Which is too bad. This is definitely a game that's in need of a map too. Just real quick observation here. Oh, makes us go all the way down there. Interesting. Yeah, it's definitely a lot of games for the. I mean, pretty much all the games for the Game Boy are technically like tile based in some way. But this seems almost like very like old school RPG in a way, where yeah, you just press left, and yeah, you advance one tile, which is an interesting way of doing things. Oh, I must have just ignored that over there. Of course, now we're completely lost. We did go left this way, right? Pretty sure we did. Oh yeah, because this just loops around up here. And unfortunately, our magic axe only works on certain trees. It doesn't work on all trees. It's not a very talented magic axe. Probably because it's a pickaxe. I can't imagine trying to knock out it. Oh geez, we lost so much health there. Yeah, there's nothing up here. But yeah, I think that is Roland's curse here. Kind of a bit of a shorter selection of games this week. But I still think we found some pretty interesting gems in here. We got to learn about a pitcher who's a complete jerk. Learn about the father of the Game Boy and his impact on Nintendo. And I got to talk about a couple of developers that, you know, existed in the 80s, and while they unfortunately went to defunct, you know, later on into the 2000s, they at least had some interesting contributions to the Game Boy, or in the case of Real-Time Associates, to the Saturn with Bug. That hot banger of a game. This is about the part where I say whether or not you should go and play Bug or not, but I don't suggest doing that. I don't think it's that great of a game. As far as what games you should play from this, I think Radar Mission is interesting. I'm not sure if it's a good game, but I think it's interesting. Probably a good multiplayer game. I think Roland's Quest actually could be worthwhile to play. If albeit probably a little frustrating with how easy it is to get lost around here. And Dick Tracy should be avoided at all costs. Do not play Dick Tracy. It's a bad video game. Can I jump down this pit? No, I cannot. So, what do we have coming up for next week? Next week, we're going to be moving on to Hatris, a couple of licensed games in We're Back, A Dinosaur Story, and Simpsons, Bart versus the Juggernaut. And finishing up with Bionic Battler. I do want to thank everybody for joining us this time around. A bit of a shorter episode this time, but I still think we've talked about some pretty interesting things here. I just appreciate you all coming in and joining us. You can find additional episodes on my YouTube channel, by the way. Which, there we go. Right on down there. youtube.com/user/one-more-time-GFSN. So, you should totally check that out. Episode 4 should be up by tomorrow. And of course, this episode will be up the following week. Appreciate everybody joining us. Thank you for the resubs. And I hope you all have a good rest of your day. Take care now.